How do you test a new sound system? This question comes all the way from Lisbon, Portugal, and Pedro wrote it. How do you test a new sound system? Do you use music? And what music do you use? Do you use frequency oscillators? And how? In the past, I've seen a lot of people judging a sound system by how a specific song was recorded or sounded. As a sound engineer, I know that there isn't a perfect recording out there. Boy, that is true. Most of the times, I end up using some heavy metal recordings. Well, okay, because the overall sound is more pink noise sounding. Okay, it exposes more of the sound system for me. Whatever works, man. I tend to deviate from very analytical processes like frequency oscillators and analyzers. Cheers and thank you for your show. Well, Portugal certainly is on my list of places to go visit. When we design a new product, it goes through two basic phases, which we jokingly call the first 95% and the second 95%. So the first 95% of the work is done here in this kind of environment. This is called an audio precision. It's over here, and again, apologies to Ohm's Law listeners. It's a very expensive, very sophisticated computer-based measurement system that we can tell almost everything from simple things like distortion, frequency response, and noise, to phase angles, running full FFTs on everything to try and figure out, all the aspects of a piece of audio equipment and to get it to where it measures the way that we want. And that is truly the first 95%. I mean, because you start with the circuit designs that are based on the circuit goals and the price point you're trying to hit and what you're trying to achieve. And always, we work really hard at making sure our products sound like music. So I don't care if we're making a $100 this or a $10,000 that. The one thing you can always be guaranteed of with our products is that somebody took the time to make sure they represent music in the way it should be represented, that it sounds musical, right? We're not so, I'll sacrifice all kinds of things in favor of music. If I have a noise goal of this and I find that achieving that noise goal sacrifices the musicality of the product, either I change the design or I just screw it and we get a little more noise. Music is first. And obviously we're not the only manufacturer that thinks that, but from us, that's what you're going to get. So we achieve that through design and experience, what kind of parts, and we get it all working here. That's the first 95%. The second 95% of the work, sometimes 120% of the work, comes in the listening room. Now the design is done, we go into the listening room. And there, we may have to scrap the whole thing and start over. There we make changes, we change components, we rearrange things, come back here, make sure we didn't screw something up in the measurements, go back up there. I mean, it's a long process. So, I mean, people say, why does it take you 1 year to 2 years to design a product? Well, that's why. It's a very long process of crafting circuitry, measuring circuitry, listening to circuitry, going back and forth, and all based on years and years of experience of knowing what is going to sound musical and what isn't. So to the broader question that you're asking, what kind of music, once we get to that phase in our design process that we use, I've got, and I publish it. If you go onto Google and you look at Paul's Post Picks, Paul's Post Picks, Paul's Post Picks. Just Google it. It'll come up real quick. And you'll see that in my Paul's Post, in my daily blog, I've posted a number of times, I think 3, 4 separate times, different lists of tracks that I use for evaluating hi-fi, and everybody around here uses those same tracks, and they have their own favorites as well, of course. But we use a standard set of tracks, and here's the thought process behind that. As you pointed out, there is no, and there are no perfect recordings. What there are really good recordings that are all over the map in terms of depth. Some have great depth, some have no depth. Some have great bass, some have no bass. Some have, on and on. You get the gist of this. Some have perfect tonality, perfect dimensionality. Others are kind of upfront and harsh. Some are heavy metal. Some are, not a lot of heavy metal. But there's some pretty wild stuff in that collection. And then there's some great audiophile hits. So we run through 20, 30 different types of tracks that are known to us to find out if there's a common element. So for example, if every track out of, say, our 10 favorite, our 12, our baker's dozen, right? Isn't that 13? So if our favorite tracks all have foreshortened depth, then we know there's something wrong with the depth, because not all tracks have a lot of depth, but out of that dozen or so tracks, some of them better have the proper amount of depth. Tonality, bass, some of them have great bass, and what if I always heard there was always a chesty sound to every voice had this chesty sound to it? Well, then we would know there's an imbalance. Doesn't show up here, and I know, believe me, we can change tonality without reflecting anything here, but we're not going to get into that. But if it's too much there, or the highs are kind of screechy throughout all those tracks, we look for common traits. And the trait that we're looking for is no common trait. So to the extent that we can run through that list and everyone sounds like itself, like we know it should, and it measures well, then we know we have a winner. And that's what we go for. Okay, hope that helps. And please go online, Paul's Post Picks, and you'll find that list that you can copy and try it out for yourself. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye.